So back to Tyler Perry's case, or I should say, Derek Dixon's lawsuit against Tyler Perry, right? And I want to be very careful about how I talk about the case going forward, just because, you know, I'm, I should be neutral to some extent. I mean, I have been open that I admire Tyler Perry's prolific work ethic, his creativity, and so on and so forth. And so, while I wouldn't say that I'm a fan necessarily, I would say that he's someone that I admire. He's very successful. He built himself up from nothing, and I do admire people like that. At the same time, I want to try to avoid um, saying anything overtly prejudicial against Derek Dixon, the person who brought this case against Tyler Perry. I wasn't there. I don't really know what happened. I know that I believe in Tyler Perry. He seems like a decent human being. And so, there is that. But before we jump to conclusions about the lawsuit that Mr. Dixon filed against Tyler, I think it's important to remember that allegations are not proof. Allegations are not proof. And so I've been watching some other people's videos on YouTube, and it's almost like they've already convicted Tyler Perry, and they're just very, very strong in their sentiment about him and his character, and even about what happened, without having all of the evidence, right? And without really, I think, respecting the basic fact that allegations are not proof. Anybody can allege anything, right? And I know that there's some emails that even I saw, and I paused and I gasped even. But then I realized, wait a minute, I don't know the full context. I don't know what was said before Tyler wrote that. I don't know what was said after, right? And context does matter, right? So I'm trying to step into the role of like an armchair defense attorney to examine what his legal team might argue, right? And why the allegations made by the plaintiff could look very different when they are examined on the oath, right? One of the most discussed aspects of the case, obviously, is the alleged communication between Perry and Dixon, the texts, the emails, etc. And it just seems that we're at risk, I should say, of cherry picking the tone or the timing of these emails and these communications without full context. Again, allegations are not proof, they're not evidence. Anybody can allege anything, right? And anybody's text messages could be misconstrued depending on the circumstances, right? Anybody's text messages. It doesn't even have to be of a certain nature. You could write a totally non I don't want to say the word because of the algorithms, but you could write a text message that has nothing to do with anything illicit and still taken out of context. You never know what people can do with that. It's almost better not to write anything to anybody because people can twist anything that you say, right? But when two adults exchange personal or even flirtatious messages, I think the context matters very greatly, right? Was this a professional relationship that grew friendly? It seems that it did, right? Until it didn't, right? And so at some point, it seems that a friendship had blurred into a flirtation based on some of these text messages, right? And so the question is, was Mr. Dixon and Mr. Perry of the opinion that, they were strictly professional, or were they of the opinion, reasonably so, that they were now in a friendship territory, sort of outside of the professional barriers? whereby they were socializing together, there was reciprocal contact, and there's a mutual tone of flirtation where Mr. Perry could reasonably have believed that his attention was welcomed by Mr. Dixon, right? Because that's where we get into the whole harassment territory, is where the attention is unwelcomed. So, is there anything in those text messages that came before or after to show that these were unwelcome text messages, or will they show that this was a flirtation going on between these two people that led Mr. Perry to reasonably believe that his attentions towards Mr. Dixon and his words were welcomed by Mr. Dixon? Because, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not illegal ipso facto to be attracted to someone you work with or even someone who works for you, right? It's not illegal to flirt even with a subordinate unless the behavior is unwanted, it's coercive, or it's tied to job consequences, right? So the line between awkward flirtation and unlawful harassment is drawn, I think, by consent and the perception of consent, right? The reasonable perception and belief that the person welcomes your attention, right? And so we need to examine those text messages in an objective way to figure that out, to figure out the context and the tone, not just take one text message out of context and accuse this man and find him guilty in the court of public opinion before we have all the information and all the facts. So, as for the whole quid pro quo question, where there's this perception that Mr. Dixon felt that his job was tied to his welcoming of Mr. Perry's attention, right? But there is no evidence of any such quid pro quo, at least not yet. I mean, the trial has not begun, but Dixon has shared quite a bit of information so far. He hasn't yet shared anything, I don't think, that Tyler tied his attention to how it would help Mr. Dixon's career, right? Dixon was cast in Perry's production and he was paid handsomely. And he even had his screenplay option, right? All because, to me, because it had merit, that he was a good actor and that the screenplay was a good screenplay, right? We all write screenplays and send to Tyler Perry. He's not going to option them all. He options, but he clearly liked the screenplay enough that he optioned it, right? I don't see how that proves that there was a quid pro quo. I mean, did Mr. Dixon have to do anything to have this optioned other than present a screenplay with merit, right? So unless there's written or spoken proof that Perry ever implied, you must comply for me to option your screenplay, that he retaliated when Dixon didn't, I think the legal threshold for quid pro quo harassment isn't met. I mean, this guy got his screenplay option without doing anything, clearly because his screenplay had merit, right? Disappointment or career changes, like, for example, a character being written off in a show, doesn't automatically equal retaliation, right? Creative reasons, budget shifts, or storyline changes are valid defenses if unconnected to personal conflict, as this man is alleging here. Look, the bottom line is, just to wrap this up, people form complicated professional relationships all the time. When attraction enters the mix, obviously misunderstandings can and do arise, especially when, one person holds more power or visibility than the other person, right? The law, to my understanding, doesn't punish attraction. It punishes abuse of power and unwanted sexual conduct, right? And right now, the question isn't whether Mr. Dixon's feelings are real, it's whether the evidence that he has and the evidence that he presents shows that the conduct of Mr. Perry was unwelcome and tied tied to professional harm. Okay, that's the legal test. So, where I see the case right now is that context matters, right? Those messages could have been mutual or misinterpreted. So we have to see all the messages that came before, right? The socializing could indicate friendship, not coercion. This guy staying at Tyler's house and so on. That sounds like a friendship, right? The professional outcomes could have legitimate creative explanations, right? He got written off or whatever. Doesn't mean that it was retaliation, right? That's what counts. That's what courts are for, right? To test all of this under scrutiny, not on the trending topics on YouTube. But the bottom line is whether you believe the allegations Mr. Dixon raises or you doubt them, remember this: a good defense isn't about denying justice, it's about demanding fairness. And the fact that someone makes allegations doesn't mean that they have proof or sufficient evidence to prove these allegations. Anybody can allege anything, right? And the final thing is that context matters. And you always have to look at the context. You can't look at things out of context and then declare someone guilty in the court of public opinion. You have to look at what came before and even what came after to decide the context and the tone, the truth of the matter, right? The truth of the matter, the true context, the true tone before you come to a conclusion about somebody's guilt, right? The fact that this man, Mr. Parry, is the more powerful and the richer guy, or he's a billionaire, so let's just take him down for $200 million because he sent a flirtatious email, I just don't think that that's right, right? I don't think it's fair without proof.